Live from inside the Matt Black Kia Studios, it's Football at 4.
Football at 4, powered by the Inside the Birds podcast. Great stuff from Jeff Mosher yesterday. Andrew DiCecco back today on the Sports Bash on 97.3 ESPN as we start looking ahead to the Eagles taking on the Washington football team. What can we expect from the Eagles against the Washington football team? I mean, heck, I don't even know who's playing for Washington. Is it Alex Smith? Is it Taylor Heineke? I know Heineke was taking the first team snaps. What does all of that mean? We'll get into the next with Andrew DiCecco right now on the Boardwalk Kind of Hotline on 97.3 ESPN. Andrew, how you doing today?
Josh, I'm doing well. How are you?
Doing pretty good. And I want to start with the quarterback situation for Washington because I don't think it can be talked about enough about the fact that if you have Alex Smith versus Taylor Heineke at quarterback, you're looking at two completely different functioning offenses. Alex Smith is a game manager who's very functional. He's a veteran quarterback. And Taylor Heineke is what he sounds like. He's Taylor Heineke.
Yeah, I mean, when you look at the magnitude of the injury that Alex Smith sustained, if there's anything, and if there's any inkling that, that they don't want to rush him back or that there could be a chance of aggravating that, they're not going to put him out there regardless of the talent drop-off in the quarterbacks. I mean, I think it's going to be Taylor Heineke, and I think they're just going to roll with that and hope that their defensive line can get home a few times and kind of make it a game.
What are you looking for on Sunday? For me, it's pretty simple. It's the compete level. I just want to see them go out there and sort of like what Jason Kelce said to the media and what J.J. Watt was saying, when you are a professional, when you're in this business, you have to carry yourself a certain way. And I want to see, because there's a lot of questions surrounding this franchise, I want to see where these players are at right now internally in terms of, I take this craft seriously and I'm still bought into Doug Peterson and my professionalism.
I'm actually looking forward to this game because this is where you really get to see the players that have fully bought in and some that may have checked out. And that's where you figure out who you want to be a part of the Philadelphia Eagles if you're the coaching staff and you're evaluating and who you don't want in that locker room. And like you said, this is a profession. This is their jobs. You want to go out there and give 100% regardless of that draft stuff out the window. I mean, you have to go out there and they're going to play competitive. And I mean, I think that they're going to be, all the starters that are available, the healthy starters, I think they'll be out there, and you are going to see a mix of young players in there because that's what they have. I mean, they don't really have any other choice. But I mean, I would like to see Jalen Hurts put together, look more like the Jalen Hurts that he was in Arizona. Turn the football over far less than what he did. You want to see Jalen Reagor take that next step. Really show that he can run NFL routes, that, just show a flash of some special traits that will kind of ease the minds of many fans and coaches that you invested a first-round draft pick in this guy. And I think you want to see, look at Jordan Mailata and make sure that, you have a full grasp of what he can do moving into the offseason, and then you can really assess where your needs are.
Now, you mentioned about Jalen Hurts' performance. Do we grade him at all with a curve, considering how poorly the offensive line could perform, considering the fact of you had all those false starts versus the Cowboys? And the Cowboys' defensive front is nowhere as menacing, in my opinion, as Washington with Allen and Kerrigan and Young and Montez Sweat. I mean, they got some monsters over there, and that probably be even more of a challenge than what the Cowboys presented last week.
Oh, it'll definitely be a challenge, and I mean, you have to take that into account when you're evaluating his performance. But those fumbles, they can't happen. Those costly turnovers, you got to take care of the football, regardless of who you are. He does do a good job of throwing the football away. For a young player, that's really rare. I mean, I think he's thrown the football away more times in his starts than Carson has the entire season. And you kind of just want to see him. See how he responds from a tough game, from a loss. Does he correct some of those errors, those blemishes in his game from last week? How does he prepare? And you want to see how he can execute the offense this week and and really kind of elevate the play of the guys around him, get Jalen Reagor involved, get some of these guys involved, and really end the season on a high note.
Obviously, Jalen Hurts is going to be the starter, but was there ever a moment where you personally thought, would this be a good opportunity for Wentz in a meaningless game for the Eagles to just go out there and play? Just hit the refresh button. You don't need to worry about it. Stress, playoffs, no. Just go out and play. Because at the end of the day, there's still a serious conversation between the two, whether you like it or not. Now, once again, we know they're going with Hurts, but originally, when I first saw them lose and I thought, okay, it's over, I did question, before we found out the news, should Carson Wentz play?
Yeah, and the one thing that kind of crept into my mind, I couldn't help but wonder when Doug Peterson said that Jalen Hurts had some lower body soreness or tightness, whatever his terminology was for that. And then he said, I'll announce my starter on Monday after I look at the injury report. So then I started thinking, oh man, maybe this is setting up for Carson to make the start in the season finale here. But it makes perfect sense for Jalen Hurts to start. I mean, I always thought that regardless of health, I thought that he should have been the guy anyway, because 3 games is not enough of a sample size to really know what you have in him. I think they really need every snap to be able to take into account when they're evaluating the quarterback position and figuring out who they're going to move forward with. Do they want to look into the draft if they're not sold on Jalen? Is it going to be a quarterback competition? If they decide that they want to deal Jalen Hurts in the offseason, you certainly want to get more tape on him there. So, I mean, there's a lot to gain from him starting this week.
Andrew DiCecco joins us here on the Boardwalk Kind of Hotline here on 97.3 ESPN. Football at 4, powered by the Inside the Birds podcast. You can follow Andrew on Twitter for all his Eagles NFL coverage and NFL draft as well at DiCecco NFL on Twitter. We know the Eagles are currently locked into a top 6 draft pick. How do you feel about the people who say that the team should lose this game because they can get a better draft pick? Do you feel like those people are a little out of touch, or do you think there's anything to that?
Well, I mean, that's fans will tell you that. Fans will say, I hope that they lose. I hope that they start. I mean, I saw countless tweets this week starting Nate Sudfeld. I mean, come on, guys. I mean, you have to look at the big picture here. You have to look at the big picture, right? I mean, you got to get Jalen his start, and guys aren't going to just roll over. I mean, at least you hope not, because then you really tell the kind of character that you have in that locker room. This is a profession, and guys take pride in that, and they're going to go out there and they're going to try and win that football game. They're still going to have a top draft pick in the top 10, and they're still going to get a blue chip player. It's just, regardless of what happens, I think they're going to go out there and give it their all. And I mean, that's what you can hope for if you're the coaching staff.
Some interesting news came out today. The 21-day practice window was open for Davion Taylor and Brandon Brooks. What does that mean to you, and what do you think that means for the organization?
Well, it doesn't make much sense on the Brandon Brooks front because, well, one, it doesn't necessarily even mean that he's going to play this week. But two, even if he was ready to play this week, why would you want to throw him out there with kind of like a battered and broken offensive line? He's coming off a serious injury. Why risk potentially aggravating that and then having another setback for a meaningless game? As far as Davion Taylor, I thought that was pretty interesting because he really needs all the snaps that he can get because he's going into his first offseason having barely played at all, and they really don't know what they have in him yet. So, and he's going to be a guy that if he is ready to roll for a Sunday, he's going to get the lion's share of the snaps, I would think, at the linebacker spot because they really need to assess what he does well and what they need to work on, what he needs to work on in the offseason.
Is there a player that you want to see on Sunday, not named Jalen Hurts, that you're saying, I need to see fill in the blank from this guy to be confident in him moving forward for the Eagles?
I think you want to see Alex Singleton, continue to have that strong play. You want to see how he holds up, prove that he's not, it's not just a flash in the pan, that he can be, and he's an NFL starting caliber linebacker. And the Eagles really need to know that because, I mean, TJ Edwards is not a starting linebacker in the NFL. He's a rotational player, a rundown linebacker. But if you have something there in Singleton, you can kind of narrow it down to know that you have to get one other linebacker in the offseason. But you really he needs to show that he can, and we know he can defend the run, but how is he going to be in pass coverage? Can he hold up against the tight ends and kind of, roam sideline to sideline, be that, 3-down linebacker that the team really needs? It's a shame about Josh Sweat. I would have liked to have seen him play a bunch of snaps, even more snaps than he would have normally played, because I really do think there's a lot of potential there with him. But unfortunately, he's out for the season. Jordan Mailata is a guy that I'll be watching again. That's a strong defensive line. You can make an argument it's the best defensive line in football. So you kind of want to see how he does there. Secondary, man, that's kind of a mess. I would like to see Kayvon Wallace and see what Kayvon Wallace can do. He really hasn't had an opportunity to show what he could do. Only played 19 snaps last week. Got out-snapped significantly by Graylin Arnold, which was puzzling, and also Marcus Epps. So those are a few guys that I'll be looking at.
One name that stood out to me when Josh was asking that question was Quez Watkins, and I want to get your thoughts on what do you think his ceiling can be when he's at his best, what he can grow into. What type of role do you think that is?
I think Quez Watkins can be a third option. I think he can be. He's already looks more explosive than Jalen Reagor. I mean, I did not expect Quez Watkins to kind of adapt to the NFL that quickly, especially with no offseason as a 6th-round pick, but. I think that he can be that Deshaun Jackson type deep threat for the team, and I think his role is going to continue to grow. I mean, he's still learning the different, how to run NFL routes, and there's still weight that he can add to his frame, and I think that he can be a prominent piece. It's just he needs the time to develop in the off season, but you have to be encouraged with what you've seen from him. I think that he can be a third option though, to answer your question.
I want to touch on something you said about Josh Sweat. So I'm very intrigued in his skill set, but I just wonder, is he a player where limited snaps makes his impact bigger? Like if he was to get all the snaps in the world, would you feel the same way as, a guy who is in the rotation and because he comes in spurts, it's more effective and it has more of that impact?
I'm glad you mentioned that because when I see Josh Sweat, I equate him to a player. You guys may remember Jaquay Parker or Jaquay Thomas. He switched his name around, but he was with the Eagles, and he was an undersized pass rusher. But when they inserted him in the lineup, he really got after the quarterback, and he was always fresh. He was a little bit undersized, not quite the size of Josh Sweat, but he was smaller. But when they made him a starter, he really lost his burst, and he kind of wore down, and he didn't have that explosiveness off the edge. And I think with Josh Sweat, it's more so the injury history that he has, like dating back to high school, some serious injuries that will kind of limit his ceiling a little bit as far as being an every down player. It would definitely hurt him a little bit there. I just wanted to see, what he could do with a full slate of snaps going against that offensive line and kind of just see what you have in him. Can he be a third end, moving forward? Because you have guys, the defensive end position is very cloudy. I mean, you have Vinny Curry, who's probably not going to be back. Brandon Graham's a little bit older. Derek Barnett, he's there. He's going to be there. But, I mean, there's a lot of questions there. And I kind of wanted to see if Josh Sweat can be that third end moving forward.
Andrew DiCecco here on Football at 4, powered by the Inside Birds podcast here on 97.3 ESPN. As we're looking ahead to Eagles versus Washington. You hear all the action starting at 7 o'clock is the coverage on 97.3 ESPN. And speaking of Washington, if the Eagles were to beat Washington, whatever the scenario is, does that change how you feel about this Eagles season? That, the idea that you ended on a positive note, or, do you only feel positive about certain players if that happens?
No, the win or loss, it won't change my opinion on the season at all. Based on you'll come out of this season feeling good about certain players and certain gems that you found that can play, such as Jordan Mailata. Josh Sweat was a great story who we mentioned, but I mean, there's certain players that had good seasons, but I mean, as a whole, this is a disappointing season all around. I mean, I don't think any of us predicted the Eagles to be the NFC East cellar dwellers when we were predicting the record this season. And I mean, this is a playoff roster on paper. Obviously, there's a myriad of different reasons why that didn't happen, but to look back and say that you end on a high note and that should be considered a good season, I don't see that at all.
When we spoke on Monday, you were pretty vocal about moving on from Doug Peterson. Well, Josh and I were having a hypothetical. If only one can go, Doug or Howie Roseman, what would satisfy you more?
Oh, Howie Roseman. When you look back at, he essentially supplies the players that Doug has to utilize, right? And the players that are on the roster, they're not good enough. Many of them aren't good enough. The guys, when you're playing in a playoff caliber game like you are last week, and you have Michael Jacquet and Graylin Arnold in your secondary, I'm sorry, that's not good enough. When you're running out, when you're trotting out, when you had to deep into your bag, dig deep into your bag to find a Travis Fulgham, it should never have gotten to that point. Like you have to supply some kind of tools that these coaches can work with. Jim Schwartz is another one. He had very little to work with, and he based on by smoke and mirrors, he kind of made it work. I think that when you look at Howie's track record, it's very poor. It's extremely poor when you look at the NFL draft. 2017 starts to look like the outlier. So I think that when you look at the guy who's pulling the strings, I think he needs to ultimately be replaced.
Andrew, big picture, if the Eagles, and I'm going to use a question that Brode asked me earlier, if the Eagles come back with some sort of version of Roseman, Peterson, and Schwartz in 2021, how will you feel about that?
I think fans can expect more of the same if they have that trio that comes back. There has to be some sort of a shakeup.
Yeah, real quickly. What if the way I laid it out was they all come back, but you actually have an offensive coordinator where he is the one OC, and you get a new quarterbacks coach, let's say. So that's what they do. They bring that in, but you have Doug, you have Jim, and you have Howie. Should that be something that we should be intrigued by, or is that not enough? I mean, how would we view that situation? What's fair?
I would say that would be a recipe for success. However, I would try and find a way where Howie just focuses on contracts, and you get somebody else in there to handle the decision making when it comes to the NFL draft and free agency and those type of decisions, because his track record is not good enough. The guys that he brings in, his evaluations, they're very far off. There's just too many misses for that to be, that was just a year or two. No, I mean, there needs to be somebody else that's kind of in his ear. But as far as the offensive coordinator, yes, that would make things a lot different on offense. Obviously, not having Doug call the plays, getting a quarterbacks coach in there, a different one that coaches, hard, something like what John DiFilippo did. I think that's what they need. And if you bring Doug back, I think that him not calling plays will kind of alleviate some of the offensive struggles, and I think that Jim Schwartz, you and I talked about this, Hunter. I think Jim Schwartz has done fairly well with what he's had to work with. He's a good defensive coordinator, and you'd be surprised about what he can do when he has the players around him that he can utilize. So I think that would be that's an interesting pairing.
Andrew DiCecco, Football at 4. You follow him on Twitter at @DiCecco NFL. He also covers the college football and NFL draft scene. So with the rest of the bowl games this week, Andrew, are there any particular players that you're keeping an eye on that might fit for the Eagles? I know we talked about Patrick Surtain a couple of days ago, but are there any other players that you're keeping your eyes on to see how they play this week in the bowl games?
Yeah, man. Look no further than tonight. The Florida Gators, they have a wide receiver named Kadarius Toney. 984 yards and 10 touchdowns this season. Explosive weapon. The Eagles may need some help at wide receiver. They do need help at wide receiver, but I don't know that they can go in the top 10 after they just spent a second on Arcega-Whiteside and a first on Jalen Reagor last year. But he's a guy, and also Ventrell Miller, the linebacker, 86 tackles, 3.5 sacks. He's very active. He flows sideline to sideline, and he's the type of linebacker that is what the Eagles need. Those are just a couple guys right there.
Yeah, you can't be mentioning the SEC. You got to look at the Pac-12 receivers and the Big 12 receivers. You can't go SEC on us. You know they don't look that way.
They have to consider Kadarius Toney, man. He's an absolute monster.
If my memory recalls, I think the last time the Eagles drafted an SEC wide receiver was Reggie Brown from Georgia. So
ouch, yeah, back in 2005.
Yeah, so I think that's the last time they drafted SEC receiver, just to follow up on Brode just said. He's Andrew.
Wow, yeah.
Andrew DiCecco, Football at 4, powered by the Inside the Birds podcast. We know he'll be watching all the bowl games this week. The Cotton Bowl tonight, Florida versus Oklahoma. Coverage begins at 7 o'clock on 97.3 ESPN, at DiCecco NFL on Twitter, and so guests he appeared on the Boardwalk Honda Hotline. Andrew, always appreciate the time. Happy New Year, and I hope that you enjoy your winnings from our fantasy football league.
My pleasure, guys. Happy New Year.